Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to this episode on the Untethered podcast, where we'll be diving into self-worth and empowerment. If you're wanting to make more empowered decisions in your business and in your finances, then grab a cuppa and tune in because we're going to go on a beautiful ride. What I really recognize when people are going through their journey of self-worth and empowerment is there's two ends of the spectrum, right? There's for the purposes of people being able to understand these concepts, I'm using labels. But if we look at self-worth, well, like the bank account can be one end of the spectrum in complete deficit, or in other end of the spectrum, like just unlimited source of endless flow. And then if I was to attach identities to those ends of the spectrum, there is on one end of the spectrum, the person who identifies with being in a deficit is generally the people pleaser. It's the empath, the people pleaser, the person who always gives. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, that endless flow, if we move, I guess there's the light and the dark, right? So you've always got light and dark, positive and negative, or empowered and disempowered, right? And I guess the disempowered space of endless flow is kind of the overinflated ego, for want of a better word, the narcissist or the egocentric, the person who just wants to receive, right, but doesn't give. Or it's not that they don't give, I guess it's their relationship to giving is fractured. It's conditional, right? There's lots of conditions wrapped up, right? Whereas the other end of the spectrum, there's like no conditions and it's like there's no boundaries, right? So no one place or one part on this spectrum is right or wrong. I see it as two just different journeys. There's the journey of the people pleaser to grow an ego and stand up for themselves and start to bring in boundaries and speak their truth. And then there's the overinflated ego that their life has been so self-centered and self-focused, they need to wake up to the people around them, like read the room, drop some of that act, drop some of the conditions, like humble down. Yeah, so humble down, and it can be this beautiful meeting in the middle. And these two journeys, when you look at it from a perspective of self-worth, right? You've got the people pleaser who lacks self-worth, and then you've got the overinflated ego who has enormous self-worth, right? And maybe it's that so self-worth is your value on the self, and then self-esteem is your value outward to others. So when you have low self-worth and low self-esteem, you don't have your internal value and you can't see the value you bring out into the world. And when you have, so the overinflated ego, they see they're very high self-esteem, but very low self-worth. So that's the difference where they see their value as so important, but they lack the worth. And that's where the disconnect can be, because they don't feel worthy, but they demand that worth externally. So the journey to self-worth, whether you're the underinflated ego or the overinflated ego, it's the inner. It is the inner journey. And it always starts with the inner. And when you're trying to build this self-worth, sometimes it'll be the underinflated ego will start to show their power or start to see their power or start to speak their truth, but it might actually pendulum swing to the opposite side, and it actually is an overinflated ego that's been underinflated their whole life. So they've then grown some power and they've actually gone so far to the other end of the spectrum that they're like, I have so much self-worth now and self-esteem that I demand these boundaries. And I witness this and I can speak to it because I've been there. I've been there. So there's this beautiful balancing back into this space of like humility, grace, knowing your worth, not being overpowering and over domineering with it, and just and finding this beautiful balance between like giving and receiving to yourself and to others and understanding other people's journeys as well. So that whole spectrum, when we drop the facade or we drop the act or we drop the judgments and we drop the criticisms and we just allow things to unfold how they want to be expressed and we just observe that, then you can pinpoint where you are on that spectrum. And then you can go, all right. So I want to speak to the people that have low self-worth, right? Because this is, I think a lot of people listening will resonate with this because the people's relationship to their self-worth is like they don't want to be seen as egocentric. They don't want to be seen as self-absorbed or not caring, or they don't want to be seen as that polar opposite that they then tend to avoid things that might be interpreted that way. The self-worth, it's not the expression outward. Self-worth is the feeling inward. So I'll just give an example. And I had a client the other day. She was so excited because she has multiple sources of revenue and she received from all of these places. And it felt so good for her to be on that receiving because the receiving is ultimately the value that she's putting out in the world. And she feels valuable. So she wanted to share this experience. But then when you share that externally, we can then have that contraction phase of like, oh shit, I've just shared this. Like, what are people going to think of me because I've shared this? What are people going to say about me? Are they going to reject me? Do they think I'm egocentric or do they think I'm, all these things? And we create this. And I so remember this place so well because I would share. I would share from a place of fullness, right? And when you're in that place of fullness and you share that truth, people feel it. People feel that expression. People feel because truth is the highest vibration. And when you're in that truth and when you have high self-worth and now sharing it externally, high self-esteem, you share that. And what happens is you then become a beacon for that truth. Then what happens after that is either empowering you or it is disempowering you. So the empowerment comes when in the moment you made that decision to share that thing, who cares what anybody thinks? You're valuable and you know your worth. You know what you received and you're grateful and you're sharing that because at the end of the day, when you share that, you then become the permission piece for other people go, oh, maybe I could have multiple revenues. Maybe I could write a book. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I could do that. And that becomes a permission piece. And that is powerful. That's empowering. It powers you up and it also powers other people up because they will feel that energy and then it might be the thing that contributes to them then doing something. And that is the power. When it's disempowering, what happens is we worry about what other people think. We worry about the judgment and the criticism. Ultimately, other people's opinions of you are none of your business, but we still worry because we want people to like us. But when it's disempowering, you're focusing on the people who are disempowered by your power, right? That's the reflection. So when you share your power and then someone else is disempowered by that, it's not because you're disempowering, it's because what's inside of them, you've shared your power, and then that's reflected in them what they don't have. Right? They don't have multiple sources of revenue, or they want to write a book, but they haven't stepped into that. Or, they've got one source and they might be burnt out. It's the triggered response. It's the disempowered perception of your power. And it came to a head for me when the one thing I didn't want to be seen as, the one thing I didn't want people to think about me, ended up being the very thing I attracted. It was the very thing. I didn't want people to think I was a fake or a fraud or a criminal or a this or a that or a narcissist and I literally had it spread like wildfire. And when that happened, I had a choice of going, well, is this going to empower me or disempower? Like, that's a disempowered perception of my behavior, but I know my behavior always comes from a place of wanting to help people. And other people's opinions of me are none of my business. But am I going to focus on the empowerment or the disempowerment of this? And I was like, well, hell, I want to just power up, right? Power up. And how can I make this empowering for me and for others? So instead of focusing, it's like you kind of overcompensate, right? So you overcompensate. You don't want to be seen as a narcissist or egocentric. So you try so hard not to be that. You overcompensate and end up attracting it. Or we could go, hey, I'm going to neutralize this. And in the neutrality of it, both worlds exist. The world exists where I can share all my sources of revenue and people are empowered by that and they take life-changing, soul-aligned actions, and I don't even need to know what that is. That will just happen. And there will also be people who read that and go, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck her. What did she do? She did this or she did that, and she's not this, and she's not that. Both exist. So where do you focus your energy and your attention? If you know that both exist, and if you don't need to be anything other than who you are, and if you know that in any given moment you share from a place of love and compassion and wanting to help and serve, you might not always get it right. You might mess it up, but you mean well. So who gives a fuck what anyone thinks? And in the presentation of someone who is disempowered, we don't need to take that on because it's their perception. That is their perception, not yours. How they interpret your communication has more to do with them than it does. And when we're a people pleaser or when we're an empath and someone misunderstands us, it hurts so deeply. And we want so much for that person to just see how well intentioned we are and see how big hearted we truly are. But the fact of the matter is, the reason they don't see it is because it's not in them. They can't. They can't see it. And they might want it to be in them, but it's just not there. So the reminder of it being in someone else just reminds them it's the lack inside of them. And that ain't your journey, it's theirs. So we can just show up for ourselves with all the love and all of the intention and allow it all to be there. Because when you show up in that place, you then just keep generating that same reality more and more and more and more and more. And this is the test. So if I'm going to show up and then a judgment comes in, are you going to change your behavior based on someone else's projection of you? Or are you just going to do you? It's exhausting, right? When you change your behavior for other people all the time, man, it's exhausting. You can never keep up. You can never get it right. And even when you think you've got it right, you've still fucked up somehow. And you're like, holy crap, I thought I did everything right. And it still blew up in my face. There comes a point where you have to just hand it back. There comes a point where I notice in my relationships and in my friendships and in my, even within the team and within, managing people, there comes a point where taking on other people's shit is just too exhausting. And you've got to drop the sword. You've got to drop the shield. You've got to literally go, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to observe this behavior with no attachment to it. I'm not negative to it and I'm not positive to it. I'm not going to enable it and I'm not going to take it either. I'm going to be neutral and I'm just going to observe it, allow it to be, allow it to happen because that's their reality and yours is different. So, bringing it back to self-worth, right? When we start making those empowered decisions for ourselves and for others, it powers us up, right? Empowerment powers us. It gives us energy, and then we can then put that energy out into the world. And when we put that energy out into the world, it powers other people up, right? And we start doing things, and everyone feels, powered, empowered. And that then increases our self-worth because we've chosen ourselves, we've chosen our truth, we know who we are, and we're sharing that. And you then have this new sense of self-worth. And when you show up for community, for yourself, for your family, for your friendships, for your people from this place, your physical reality starts shifting and adjusting and changing to suit that level of self-worth. You're like, wow. It's like ultimately, we all know we're infinitely abundant and we're infinitely worthy, but we're in this physical reality that sometimes our physical reality is not showing us infinite abundance. So, how do we see our worth in our physical reality? Well, it's in our environment. So, it's in our environment. It's in our interactions, in our relationships, and it can be in our bank account. The bank account is actually a really good place to look at your self-worth because anytime I work with people on money, it's self-worth, high self-esteem, confidence, and your bank account, it's not just transactions, it's decisions. It's decisions that you're making. And the decisions that you're making in your business will tell me the level of self-worth, self-esteem, and confidence that you have. So that's how your bank balance can be the representation, right? So your bank balance isn't your worth. Your bank balance is the representation of the worth that you put out into the world. But we can't put worth or value out into the world if we don't feel worthy. So it starts within, and then we start displaying that, and then it flips and it starts showing without, right? On the inner to the outer. It always starts inside. So I was explaining just before in business metrics when we're going through, like, we're doing metrics, right? So we're doing conscious cash flow, business metrics, it's financial management. You don't understand, like, this financial management cuts through all the BS money stories just by getting it done. And that scares a lot of people. But the people who have the tenacity to show up and actually do this, and we were talking about self-worth, and we were talking about all of your financial decisions, all of your decisions either cost you money, make you money, or save you money. And what I noticed for myself in my own journey of self-worth and attachments around money was that I could help other people get rich, but I didn't feel worthy of that same richness in my life. And as I built my inner self-worth, my outer self-worth started shifting. But what I noticed was, right, because I like to spend, and I think if you're a woman, I'm a Taurus, so I like material things as well. I like the finer things, I like nice things, I like to feel good. I like to feel good. But when I had that lack of self-worth, right, I would frivolously spend, right? Frivolously spend because I'm trying to fill that void inside of myself. And I'm thinking that all of these things out there are going to fill that void because I don't have it here. And what happened when I built that self-worth is I noticed that, well, my spending didn't actually change so much. It did adjust, right? I won't lie, it did adjust. The biggest difference in my spending, though, I wasn't trying to fill that void anymore. So my spending became very intentional. So instead of just always buying something for myself because the money was just there, now it's very intentional and it's like, do I really want this? How is this going to make me feel? Is this useful? Is it da, 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 da. And of course, I get things for myself, but I actually get more enjoyment of things for others nowadays. You know, that gift of giving. I love providing. I love helping other people more so than myself, or actually equal balance. Yeah. Depends on the day. Depends on the moon cycles. Depends on my cycle. I don't know where we're at. Any day is different. I just respond to the consciousness. But I guess it was just that shift in not the purchase itself, but the intention, the why. So when your worth increases, your why changes. And a lot of people, they're in business for money, or they're in business for validation, or they want the vanity metrics, or they want, all of these things. But when we actually break it all down, and whether it's the underinflated ego or the overinflated ego, we actually come back to balance, harmony, and a space of just expression of your soul's truth. It just flows. Life becomes this beautiful ebb and flow of just you and your experience and enjoying your experience along the way, regardless of what other people say, regardless of what the bank account says, regardless of how you show up in your business. It becomes the fulfillment of who you are. And that's the self-worth. The self-worth is getting to the core of who you are and loving the absolute shit out of her or him. And that's a wrap for this week's episode on the Untethered podcast. Thanks for tuning in. You can catch me more over in the Untethered Facebook group. I'll see you there.